Hello, everyone. I'm Kara Onigatimu. We're interviewing people from across the Microsoft community, giving insight into how they have crafted their awesome careers. And I couldn't be more excited to bring someone to you today that does some fantastic work that's near and dear to my heart. So without any further ado, let me bring Eric onto the screen. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing, Caruana?
It's so good to see you again.
Great seeing you too. It's been a while.
It has. Although it feels like, I don't know, I'm living in a time compression bubble. So everything feels like it was just yesterday to me at this point.
Indeed.
So, Eric, I know you from all the great work you've done in the community, but I really want to help people understand how you got to this fantastic job you have now that is so creative, doing podcasting and broadcasting for us and so many different things. I think that you have a background as an IT pro. Is that correct?
That is correct. Since I've been 4 years old, so it started early on for me.
Oh my goodness! I'm glad that when I was four, I was a businesswoman in my early years. I wasn't a tech person yet, but I had there's a picture of me with the plastic telephone on the phone, like I'm doing. So some of us show our stripes early on. How did you go from being clearly a child prodigy into being employed in the tech space?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I always had a passion for tinkering things. Always had the idea of I want to know how things work. When I was in kindergarten, I fell in love with the idea of a server rack. Wanted a server rack in kindergarten. Fourth grade taught myself Active Directory. So if you wanted to talk about FSMA roles, and when I was in fourth grade, I was your guy. Did a lot of things in my early age that helped structure kind of where I'm at today. So life really isn't all that easy. It's never going to go as planned. And part of my career has really been built around making the best out of difficult or not so great situations.
I love that you call that out, because I feel like when I talk to people who are new in career, they think that there's a path and it implies some sort of linear progression, from one thing to the next to the next. That's not been my story nor anybody else's that I've actually ever met, with a few exceptions. But, I think it does bring you into growing maturity, and being able to handle adversity is a skill set.
For sure.
What happened for you next?
Yeah. So towards the end of high school, I went through and, fell in love with Pixie booting machines and taught myself System Center Config Manager. Completely skipped the WDS and Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, just went right to System Center Config Manager, the full enterprise suite. Kind of post high school, one of the things that caught my eye at my first internship was Microsoft Link. It had recently been rebranded to Skype for Business, and the company I worked for had just transitioned it into their new phone system. Pretty much the day one of utilizing that program, I went home and looked up different blogs hey, how do I build this? How do I configure this at home? And I'll give a little kind of shout out to Jeff Schertz. His blog was one of the first ones that I saw a long time ago. So,
you're hitting on something that's important there. I got my start in blogging in this space as well. And just for anybody out there who's listening, it doesn't have to be the most technical blog of all time, right? It doesn't have to be. Now, of course, we've all written and referenced very technical blogs, but I find that people tend to minimize their knowledge. They think, oh, I shouldn't publish that because, I don't know it. I'm not like a 400 level expert. Do you think that's true, Eric?
Correct. Yeah. Even if you are not that 400 level expert, any information you put out there is helpful to everybody, because everybody is at a different skill set in their career. Nobody is an expert in everything.
Absolutely. You're totally right. And I feel like, like I said, people like to judge the knowledge that they have as not good enough, but you really hit on something. Everybody's on a different journey at a different time. And so, and not everybody has the same perspective. A developer versus a maker versus a business analyst versus a production person, they're all going to come to the issue from a different take. And so I feel like all of that information is valid.
Yep, for sure.
So what happened next? You found his blog, and then what happened?
For over 3 years, Skype for Business was more or less just a passion of mine. It's my personal hobby, got to play around with it all the time at home. Had a lot of people during that period in time help me when I really wasn't, I would say, a somebody in the industry. And, Landis Technologies, they had a really cool product called Attendant Pro at the time. And I reached out to the owner of the organization. He's like, here, have a license. I'll let you use this, try it out. And that, kind of built a future relationship that we then built into a working relationship nowadays. So
that is fantastic. That is a really important point. That took a lot of courage to actually just reach out of the blue to the owner of a company that had something interesting that you like. Where did that courage come from?
I've always had to be the one to kind of do things. I never really had many people to rely on growing up. And, pretty much I'm always used to, hey, if you want it done, you're going to have to do it yourself. And, it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to ask. That's a big thing around my career. Anybody, hey, I need help with this. It does not hurt to ask if somebody needs help.
There's so much power in that statement. I really hope people are honing in on that. That is very true for me as well. And maybe it comes from, I too have that background of adversity. And maybe it comes from not necessarily having that safety net. We have to kind of do for ourselves and make sure things get done. And, there's a lot of scrappy people in the community. But what I really think is special is not being afraid to ask for help and just share knowledge. Because certainly when people ask me now, I'm happy to help. It makes me feel great when someone asks me to help with something, and I think people think, oh, I don't want to bother so-and-so with such and such. And I've never found that to be true in anybody I've reached out to. They may not have answered because they were busy or traveling or something, but once they knew I needed something, they were always willing to help. Has that been your experience?
That has always been the experience. So 2019 came around. And I will say 2019 was by far the most defining year of my career. There was a conference that was coming up in Denver, Colorado called Comms V Next. Mm-hmm. And it was a conference dedicated to, at the time, Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams. Yeah. Given that something that was a hobby of mine for over 3 years, I wanted to start transitioning into a point of not just being a general IT sysadmin at the time, and focusing more on the thing that I absolutely loved, which was voice with Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams.
I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Comms V Next. That conference is coming up again this year. And I happen to really love that conference because it's not so big that I can't actually hang out with people and really understand the tech that they're bringing. There's always great vendors there. The people who organize it are wonderful and longtime supporters of the Microsoft community. So big shout out to them. If you haven't got your ticket for it, you probably should, especially if you're into conference rooms, voice. Obviously, classically, it was Skype for Business. Now it's all about Microsoft Teams. But we always show some amazing devices there. I love all the suppliers that show up, all of the different headset and device suppliers, because I'm a geek for that sort of thing. And it's really fantastic. So shout out to the guys and gals who put that together down out there in Denver.
For sure.
I know we've seen each other there too.
Yep. That's actually where I met you at. So
that's cool.
Very small world.
It is a small world. So you went, so 2019 was your first year of going to that conference?
Yeah. So early on, January that year, I saw the conference. I'm like, I want to get out of just general IT. I want to get into a Microsoft style UC career. Let's go there. Maybe I can network and find some people in the community or, that are hiring, and, maybe I might find a path forward.
Yeah.
Prior to Comms VNX, though, 1 month later, I saw a post on a call for speakers. And this, was an idea that was presented that, hey, you could go speak at this conference and talk about something you like. I was nervous. I'm going to be honest. I was very nervous seeing that.
We were all nervous. We were all nervous the first time we went to go speak at something. I still get nervous. People think I don't, but I do. You never want to stand up in front of a bunch of people and first off, say you know something. And then maybe my fear is always I'm going to show up and then not know something. That used to be my fear. I'm not so worried about that anymore. Because if I don't know, I just say I don't know, right? I don't have a problem with that. But in the beginning, I didn't know it was okay to say I didn't know something, Did you feel that way?
Yeah, it always felt scary to, hey, somebody's going to ask you a question. You say, I don't know. Exactly. So
Exactly.
I submitted a session. About a month later, I was in between college and work full time, both, and was driving to college that night. Got an email saying your session was accepted. Overnight, my complete mindset change, because now, crap, you have to build an entire presentation, present it, a lot going on there. We fast forward to June. I went to my first conference. One's with international people, not just people here from the U.S. The first time even meeting people not from the U.S. So it's kind of a first for everything. Following up from that conference, I had multiple job offers, and that led into me working inside the unified communications industry.
That is fantastic. And you're another poster child for getting involved in community, letting the community support you, finding new opportunities, but also having the personal courage to take those opportunities and turn them into something. I do think that that is one of the things that both you and I share, but many people who have let the community help us find our way into, gainful employment, is to take those opportunities and do something with them and have the confidence in ourselves that we know that we can do it. We can at least try to do it.
Yep, try.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a process, right? It's a process. I know you've spoken at other places but your roles even evolved even further at these conferences now. Talk a little bit about how you and I know each other and the work that you do as the podcast master of ceremonies there. Talk to me a little bit about that. And by the way, do you call yourself a producer? What's the title you give yourself in terms of what you do at these conferences now?
The guy who wears all the hats is the best way to put it.
No worries. I've had that title. Yes,
if you name it, I've probably done it. So.
Right.
So Comms V Next kind of led to a lot more chapters, not just around my standard career, but it also led to different things in terms of my responsibilities at conferences. So Comms V Next now, I help set up for 3-4 days beforehand, making sure the conference is there. But doing that, the first year, I think it was like 2022, it convinced me that, hey, do something else, do something more. I've always had this passion of growing and doing something new to keep things interesting. And so with that, kind of what was happening in 2022, things are based on life events. You don't get ideas for things overnight.
Right.
I had a unique opportunity to have some involvement with a YouTuber called Roman Atwood. So in case you guys are familiar with YouTube in 2013, 2014, that name will probably be very familiar to you. And through those experiences, seeing behind the scenes of a production for a podcast, that inspired me to build my own kit. And so beginning in 2023, I took roughly $20,000 of my own money and built my first mobile podcast production set. So the idea behind that was that it's a bunch of equipment we could take anywhere, set it up, and we can build that podcast set.
And it's such a great way to drive engagement. It also happens to look really cool when you set everything up. So yes, so for those folks out there, Eric is a fantastic podcast producer. That is actually the name of his role. But also he's more than that because he's the technical wizard behind the scenes that has assembled the kit. You can be a producer and pull together story elements and other components of panels and narratives that you want to talk about without having the technical depth that Eric brings to it. And so, on a film set, often that is the director of photography and the producers, the directors, and the directors of photography all work together. But you do all of those things as one individual. Do you find that work creative?
I find it very creative because a lot of times when you're technical, you're not creative in terms of, hey, I do great art as an example. But, I'm very creative from hey, let's get these things to work together that maybe don't normally work together. And that's a way of me showing what I can and can't do, is with things that I build.
Absolutely. And, Eric has done live streams, and that's one of the things that I respect also about the work that you do. There's quite a difference between producing something that can be edited later, like this that we're doing right here, right now, versus going live in a conversation. Do you get that adrenaline rush when you're about to go live?
For sure. Even for this today, you get that adrenaline rush.
Absolutely. Well, this is different because you're in front of the camera instead of behind. So that
Exactly.
always makes folks nervous. But I definitely maybe I'm a little bit of a live junkie in that way because I really like that feeling of this is going live. There's no fiddling around. There's no changing the date. There's no, worrying too much more about, the details. It needs to work and it needs to work right now. And so I really enjoy that personally.
For sure. And when you're behind the camera, especially when you're doing the podcast productions or hybrid live event productions, you have to make sure everything stays working. There have been numerous scenarios where you find that things just break and you're running around, plugging things in, changing things out behind the scenes and trying to make sure that the show goes on. So
Absolutely. That is absolutely. And for me, and I heard you say that you were doing some of this work in the Skype for Business time when you were going to college. What did you go to college for?
So my degree is in computer information systems,
Okay.
specifically Cisco networking. So, advanced routing switching, Cisco voice was kind of my initial
Oh, that's
introduction
great.
through college. So
That is fantastic. I do not have a college degree, but all of the certifications and what have you that I have are actually in video production. And so I really love the fact that the technology and the creativity of what it means to be a digital media producer or a creative director has come together,
mhm,
but none of it happens if, like you said, the tech doesn't work. What's your
correct.
favorite piece of tech right now?
So I'm always changing. You probably have been able to guess that I'm always interested in something new. And the thing that right now has been majorly interesting to me has been lighting. So, if in case you've ever been to a music festival, an event where you've got time coded shows, that's the part that's kind of interesting me right now. So, not even related to teams or anything else. It's just something new to play around with, and hey, you never know what's going to come from it.
I love that. I love that work, and lighting design, people really underestimate the power of great lighting when it
Mhm.
comes to shooting, but also when it comes to just creating an environment is so important. You can tell the difference between folks, now you just moved. So this isn't a criticism of you. That I'm going to say that before I say anything else, but people who have kind of fancy lights behind them, whenever they do this all the time, they understand that creates a certain depth of visual field and other things. And so I'm really excited to see what you do in your brand new studio there that you have. Thank you for coming to us. I moved not that long ago, and boy, was that a pain to rebuild my
It's been
studio in my
multiple
house.
months.
It's just not that much fun.
No, it's not. If you have the option, hire a moving company.
Yes, absolutely. But even a moving company, they can help you rebuild all your rigs and your angles and your equipment and then test everything. And,
Yep.
I find that exhausting nowadays. I'm highly likely, if I ever move again, to just leave everything behind and start again if I can afford it, because wow, that was super painful.
Yep. Yep. You realize how much stuff you have when you move.
Yes.
That's you,
Do I
you
need
realize
all
just
those
how much
cables?
extra.
I don't need all those cables, but the minute I throw a cable out, it's happened to me multiple times. I
Mhm.
clean out my cable drawer, and then all of a sudden I needed that random weird, double-ended cable, and it is super, super annoying. If
Yep.
you could tell something to someone coming up into the community now, what message would you give to them?
I'm going to steal a quote from Disney. Keep moving forward. There will always be times where things will not go the way you plan. Nothing ever goes as planned. You have to learn to deal with those things and then overcome those challenges. I'm not just meaning from a technical perspective. Life is a pain, is the best way to put it. And the only real true failure that you would ever have is when you stop trying. So always keep trying and always keep moving forward is the kind of the thing I'm going to steal from Disney. So
Absolutely. But it's also a testament to your life experience, right? I mean, we're in this great disruption right now with AI. And I'm also interested to know, how do you think that AI and new production tools and the ability to, create all these different videos with different tools, how do you think that that's going to impact the work that you do in particular?
AI has actually been really useful from a post-production standpoint, especially when you're dealing with video. As an example, be able to get instant YouTube shorts, 30-second clips with captions from a live stream that you do. Awesome. You don't got to sit and go edit it, do text to speech or anything else. You can just pretty much pop a video into a tool and say, hey, get me some cool videos from this, and you have it. So, AI I see as a tool. It's a tool to take away the, time that you would normally be spending on repetitive tasks or things that maybe aren't the most fun things. So you can focus on the things that allow you to really to be fully creative in your day-to-day work.
I love that. And I have two favorites. One of them is there's an AI tool that lets you correct people's eye lines. When
Mm-hmm.
you do a lot of meetings, you want to publish something from a Teams meeting. People are often doing this. They're looking down as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to looking up in the camera. So now we have a tool for that. And I'm a big fan of my editor that lets me edit by the words. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do the time codes and clip. I can read the transcript and I can take out all my ums and filler words. I can delete entire sentences. Then you have to go back and smooth and polish the edit, of course. But for a rough
Mm-hmm.
cut, it works great. And I'm a big fan of that stuff. What I'm not necessarily a fan of is auto generation of talking head people, because I'm a big fan of, humans are here. I'm going
Yep.
to come up with a new hashtag for that. But I wondered if you had been using those AI tools and if much had changed in your rig configuration.
So for my event production, a lot of things that I do is live. And so a lot of times when you have AI assistants, it's not really going to be there from the live perspective. But in that post-production, again, those videos being edited quickly, for example, one of the applications I use is called Restream, and Restream as a platform which lets you stream out to multiple sources. Automatically will give you, hey, here's this cool little 30-second clip of what we think is the most important, areas of this live stream. Do you want to use this on your YouTube? And you can easily just press a single button. It uploads it to your YouTube channel.
It is so great. I know
Yep.
those kind of things used to really take so much time. I've been running our community studio here at Microsoft for, I don't know, a few years now. And, at the very beginning, that was all manual. All the social media stuff that we did, that was because somebody manually went and edited something longer form. And yeah, it's definitely helping us to amplify that shorter content, which I think people really like. I think people's attention span is changing. And how do you feel about the conversation about creativity? I feel like humans are underestimating the depth and value of the creativity that they bring to the table. I don't think AI is any threat to my creativity personally, but I don't know. How do you think about it?
Every person's unique in their own way. And that's something that I don't think AI, again, will ever have that capability of doing. There's that human aspect that even if something looks cool, there's not that necessarily that creative portion that shows that unique person's skill or their own unique touch. One video editor is not going to edit the exact same way as another video editor. It's one of those things. So that person shows their touch and what they do as a person, how they are in their creative ways.
Tell us a little bit about the company that you formed. I think there's more than one, but tell us about the one that does events first, and then tell us about the other one. Because I
Awesome.
also think that it's one of those things where people are nervous to start their own thing because it seems intimidating and complicated. I kind of want to demystify that for folks who are thinking about it. I've always had a side company, even though I have a day gig, I just think it's a good idea to have. And so, but I also was independent before I came to Microsoft. So how did you approach that?
Yeah, for sure. So for years, I'll full honesty and full transparency, it did not happen overnight. It was the idea that I had in the back of my head from an early age. And, I always wanted to be a business owner, but I never wanted to act on it because not having a solid income is a scary thing.
Yeah.
And in 2022, I was unfortunately let go from a job, and I was left without any options to move forward. And that's where, hey, let's go down this independent contractor route started at. Time I was a sole proprietor. Beginning of 2023, my company VolTech Solutions was formed. And the big reason for that is, yes, I could have continued as a sole proprietor, but the big thing there is tax separation. So, be able to have separate books and other things is, taxes, learning that has not been fun.
No, it is never fun. And, shout out to some of the online experiences that you can use. And we'll put some resources out there along with this tech talk to start to understand that. I mean, that is one of the reasons that I have a side business as well, which is it's tax separation, but also liability protection, right? And so I think that's really important for people to understand. It's not just about, oh, I have a dream of having a company. There's some very practical reasons to form an LLC or form your own company. And then, of course, I always learned about the fact that I want to be able to make money even when I'm not the one in the chair, right? Then you can have other folks along the ride with you in different ways. So, yeah, that's a really good shout out for people. But I don't want folks to be intimidated. It's totally doable, don't you think?
So, kind of past building the business, it took a lot of money up front to build things, get things going. But that company has transformed into not just an independent contracting type organization, but it's also that event production business. And one of the things that's been very fortunate with starting that business is always taking care of people that have always been there for you. Yeah. And my friends, my family have always been there. And my goal with that business is to always treat everybody that does work, through that organization as part of my family, because they are. It's, I nobody likes being a number on a list. People like being part of something bigger.
Right.
So,
they absolutely do. And that's you bringing your personal integrity and passion to the table, which just, it makes every day a little bit sweeter too, when you're doing it that way, for sure. Now, what's the other company that you have?
Yeah, so the other company is actually another one I started this past year with a really good friend of mine. The company is called Eighth Layer Technologies. And it's built around the idea of the OSI model, where there's 7 layers, where the 8th layer, it's the human part of that plus everything else beneath it. And our company is more or less a independent IT consulting firm. So we have everything from infrastructure to sysadmin work to anything in Microsoft 365. And so it's always doing something new.
I love that. And also because there's a large need for that type of smaller consulting organization that can do that administration, especially in the medium-sized business space. I run across, because of the public sector work I do, I run across a lot of organizations. Maybe they have 500 or even, a few thousand people, but they don't necessarily have a full-time IT person, or that person is wearing multiple hats, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And, being an IT administrator nowadays is quite a complex task. I think it's very difficult for people who this isn't their profession to keep up on all the things that are happening, especially now with AI.
Correct.
How do you go about marketing your company and finding customers? Or has it been word of mouth, or do you engage with community outreach? What do you do there?
So it's kind of a mix of everything. The big way that I've been able to be successful in my career has been around word of mouth and knowing people. Everything with business is there's the people and there's the things that and they have to have an even balance between those two. If you know everything, but you don't have any customers, well, then you have no business. So it's kind of you have to find a way to balance those and build those connections with others in the community. Everybody has unique skill sets that define them. And, whenever we come across a scenario that maybe we don't have the right resources for, there's tons of people in the community that we reach out to and say, hey, is this something that you can do? We know that you've done the X, Y, and Z. Can you do this? And that's led to a lot of new people kind of coming on board and helping us out on that journey. So
that is fantastic. I love this, your curiosity for technology, your courage to try new things, your ability to reach out through the community and have those opportunities that came from the community, really working them to turn them into something that's now led you to have 2 companies and a very bright future. You're inspirational, Eric, and I already knew that, but I'm just happy to bring your story to everyone else so that they can know it too.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. Well, thank you for joining us. And now turning back to our audience, Eric's story is fantastic, and it's an opportunity that all of us have to indulge in our curiosities and reach out and make connections with other people so that we can improve our careers. That's what it's all about, right? Making connection and having financial stability and doing work that really brings us some meaning. I am Kara Wanagatimi with Microsoft. Thanks for joining me today.